Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tables. Now, I did tell you that it didn't matter what type of HTML editor you were using, and it's still not a big deal, but for this case, I want to show it to you in Dreamweaver because it's a little bit more visual and it might make a little bit more sense. Now, as with all the other tags and things that we have gone through so far, there's a lot more to explore, and I'm just going to touch on it so you get the basics of it, but it is up to you to explore it more, figure out some of the different nuances to it and how it may benefit you and how to use it within your web page. So again, in Dreamweaver here, what I do like about Dreamweaver is that there is the option to go into either just code view, where I'm seeing the code, which is how we've worked for the most part here, or we can go into split mode where you can actually see what the web page will kind of look like up here while I edit my code down here. Now the other thing that Dreamweaver has is a little bit more of a visual area where I can add certain types of HTML tags by just clicking on the little icon over here. So maybe if I wanted to add an image or a paragraph or an unordered list, all things we've done so far, I can add that into here and I can visually see it appear up here. Now some of these, they will give me contextual boxes that ask me certain questions to fill out before I go too far. Like maybe for an image, it's going to ask me what the link to that image is. Does it need to link to something else? Whatever. Little things like that. And the table is no exception. There's actually more rules to that. So again, that's why I want to show you in Dreamweaver how it goes, just so it can be a little bit more visual and make a little bit more sense to you, hopefully. So let's go ahead and click just in the body area here so I know where I'm putting my table. And I'm going to click on the table option up here. Now, this is how a table is made up. If it's made up of rows and it's made up of columns. So you can think of this as kind of like an Excel file. There's those horizontal rows and there's vertical columns. And each one of those cells you can add something into. So now the next question is, what is the table width? And you can say, I want my table to be 500 pixels. Or maybe I want it to be 90% of the width of the screen. So it's going to continue to stretch out or get smaller. Now this is not really good. It's kind of how you want it to be if it was in CSS, but there are other things in CSS that's going to allow it to format better. Right now, if I put this as percent, things may not scale evenly and it's just going to get a little jacked up. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and give it a fixed width of 500 pixels. And just so we can see the actual HTML file, I'm going to add a border thickness to all the cells in there of 1 pixel. And I can also add some other things like cell padding. Once you see the table, to make a little bit more sense what cell padding is and cell spacing, but for the most part, those are the main attributes that you may want to add. So for right now, I'm going to keep this as 2 rows and 2 columns just to keep it a little bit smaller. And I'll hit OK. So when I hit OK, you'll see that down here, it added a whole bunch of code, starting with the table tag, and then some attributes, and then some other table information here. But what it also did is added something up here into the visual area where we added 2 rows and 2 columns. And we added a border thickness of 1 so you can actually see the border going around my table here and I know where things are at. Now again, with Dreamweaver, it's kind of cool because you can add information either way through the code or into the visual editor up here, and they both kind of work together. So maybe I wanted to add in this first area right here, maybe my name. You can see that when I click in there, it actually starts to kind of highlight it down here in the code, so I know right where it goes. So I'm going to delete that information and I will add name. And as soon as I type it in up there, it appears right up here. So I will say Keith. Actually put a little colon right there, so maybe this looks like a contact form, kind of, but we'll get to that. Alright, and again, as soon as I type that in, it appeared up here. And let's say phone number, colon. And I'll go ahead and put a fake number in here because I don't want you guys calling me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Don't even try calling that number. Alright, so now I've got a nice table. Everything is aligned. I've got some spacing here. It just kind of laid out nicely. So I'm going to save this file. This is still just my index.html. And I'm going to add my index.html file over here. And just like Dreamweaver was showing me in the visual area, it has this nice border going around here, and it has name and phone and my name and my phone number right below it there, just like the table does. and that's it. So if I were to stretch out my browser or make it smaller, you can see that table's not being affected. Whereas nowadays we really want it to kind of scale and stretch depending on the size of my browser. So if I was looking at this on a mobile device, it may fit nicely as well as on a desktop. But we can worry about that later as we get into some of the other classes. But for now, let's go ahead and dissect a little bit more of how this table is made up.